Hi, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Hangout. I am here with Bryan McClellan and Sam Sykes, two epic fantasy authors on the Orbit list. Bryan is the author of The Autumn Republic, which just came out. It's the third book in the Powder Mage Trilogy and ends that trilogy. And Sam is the author of The City Stained Red, also brand new. That one starts a series. It's the Bring Down Heaven series. Before we get started, I'm going to note that we'll be taking audience questions. If you're watching us in Google, you can ask questions directly with the Q&A feature. Otherwise, if you're watching on YouTube, you can ask questions on Twitter. You can see underneath my name, Orbit Books, is the account where you can send your questions. And we also have a hashtag that you're welcome to use, which is the Orbit SFF Hangout. All right, so as I mentioned, guys, you both have new books coming out, but one of you is ending a series, one of you is beginning a series. Of course, the one who is ending a series once began a series, and as it happens, the one beginning a series once ended a series. So how do you feel about your series when you're beginning it versus when you're ending it? Are you really relieved, Bryan, to get to the end of it, or do you wish you had more to write?
That's funny because I'm the next series is kind of a sequel trilogy in the same world, so it kind of is it is kind of like I'm continuing what I'm working on. I'm not jumping around at all.
You're kind of cheating a little bit.
Yeah, I am kind of cheating on that respect. But it is really cool to kind of be finished and have it all done and out there, and be able to kind of work on something that is a separate project.
Nice. Um, yeah.
Sam, what about you?
Sorry.
Talk. You should
Yeah.
have to tell you to talk.
Well, I was gonna say because I'm sort of in the reverse situation in that the previous trilogy was also a sort of Schrodinger's continuation of this trilogy, in that it's a continuation and it's not a continuation. So I've been encouraging people to start with The City Stained Red, and they've all seemed to really enjoy it. So basically, what I'm saying is, like, Bryan and I are both just tremendous frauds in that we don't seem to really be ending or beginning anything.
Hey, you can speak for yourself.
No,
I'm genuine.
I want us all to be in on this, but I do echo what Bryan says, is because there is a lot of freedom that comes without the baggage of previous trilogies, so that there's a lot more freedom to just say, all right, well, pretty much anything I'm thinking of, I can just put down right now and deal with it later.
Yeah, I think it's a great deal of fun to be able to kind of be like, hey, look, I've got this all in the bag, and now I can move on.
It's a good point. I hadn't thought about the fact that you both have two series that are set in the same world. Do you have other worlds that you want to write in, or do you basically just have one good idea and that's it, and you're going to be done after this?
Oh man, just
that is
throwing that right out.
Questions.
That is significantly passive aggressive.
I think it's just aggressive, actually. I don't think there was any passive about it.
That is bald-faced aggression. I was like doing the passive bit for your benefit, but since the gloves are off, no, there's a lot of stuff that I want to write, but I feel it's kind of a trap that a lot of authors fall into, where they talk about all the stuff they want to write and all the stuff they want to do. I try to make it my policy not to talk about what I want to do until I'm doing it. Then I feel that's, like, when it has real progress, then I feel like I keep myself out of that trap.
Yeah, I do think that there's a bit of a psychological trap to that, like saying, expressing to someone about something that you want to do, and then once you've expressed it, you're kind of like, oh, maybe I'm not that interested anymore. But you've kind of made this like inherent promise to maybe your readers that you're working on something else. I think I've got plenty of ideas, and there's other things that I'm interested in doing and working on. I'm loath to spend so much time in in the series that I just finished, in the world, and then just say, oh, I'm abandoning that world, even though it's got a great fan base and I've spent a whole bunch of time on the world building, which is one of the reasons I'm continuing on with it, because people seem to love it, and when I released book 3 last 2 weeks ago. I had tons of questions. The biggest question was, are you doing more in the Powder Mage universe? and most people really wanted me to, so I was glad to be able to say yes.
Yeah, I mean, I feel, you do occasionally find the occasional person who will grumble about series going on forever, and especially in our genre. But to me, I feel if you've got more to say, then there's nothing wrong with saying it, and if people are enjoying it, then there's nothing wrong with continuing to write that.
Some of the most kind of beloved series out there in fantasy are the ones that the author stuck with for 20 years or so, like the Shannara books. I mean,
Yeah.
kept going and going, and they did that because people loved them and wanted to read more of them. And I'm not saying I want to do that necessarily, but I have no problem with continuing with what I'm doing, until I get bored, or until they're not selling anymore, or
Yeah.
some combination of the above.
I was trying to think, like, what is the ratio, the like furthest ratio of unpopular to longevity you can get? Like, is there a series out there that is just absolutely despised, but it just keeps going?
I well, I can think of one, but I don't want to say it out loud.
Yeah, no,
so.
I mean, obviously don't say it. We'll wait till we're off air where we talk about it.
It probably depends who you ask. There are some people who despise some series, some people who despise other series.
Yeah,
The
that whole subjectivity thing.
the Wheel of Time fans were like, there was a point at which they were like the most self-hating lot out there, and then Brandon finally got that cleaned up.
Yeah.
But that was one of those kind of shaky ones for a long time.
Every fandom has an element of self-loathing. Like I will profess to being like a Drizzt Do'Urden fan, but I don't sing that from the mountaintops. That's not my opening line in a bar when I meet a girl.
What is your opening line in a bar when you meet a girl, Sam? Do we want to know? We probably don't even want to know. Let's
I don't know if this is...
My
We're
opening
keeping this
line-
PG-13, aren't we?
Yeah, my opening line is not Drizzt Do'Urden, it's Dragonlance. Oh God. Great opening line, but we can't say it here. I'm just gonna continue to say.
Yeah. This could take a really poor turn if we let Sam run wild here.
Yeah, no.
We'll go somewhere else with this then.
Yeah, why don't you are losing?
Let's talk about that. Let's talk over one another so no one can understand us. Let's talk about epic fantasy a little bit. What attracted you to the genre? Was it the fact that you can create these huge sprawling series or huge sprawling worlds? Was it the world building? Is it the sort of mythic stories and characters? Sam, why don't we start with you, since Bryan, I think, answered the last question first.
Oh yeah. Those are all definite allures, but I don't think I appreciated them until much later. Like today, as I'm 4 books in, soon to be 5, of my publishing career, I have an immense appreciation for the fact that I don't have to do as much research as a lot of authors do, and I can make up a lot of stuff. But what started me on epic fantasy was probably just the fact that I read a lot of epic fantasy before I started writing it, and that's just what influenced me. It's what I was interested in, so it's stuff I wanted to keep. It's what I wanted to write, which I think that is the same of everyone. I don't know of an epic fantasy writer who's, well, no, I do know of that, but I was gonna say I don't know of someone who read a lot of mysteries and said, this sucks, I want to write epic fantasy. But there's probably someone out there that does that.
What were you reading? What influenced you?
Well, like I said, somewhat shamefully, I started with Dragonlance and whatnot, but I sort of grew out of that, hit my stride. Really, Game of Thrones influenced me a lot, and it's almost like passé to say that now because who didn't it influence? But I almost think they sort of worked off each other because, spoiler alert to anyone who has not seen or read the first Game of Thrones, when Ned Stark died, I was immediately flipping ahead to find like the spell or the plot device that was going to save him and show he was really all right all along. But no, it wasn't there. He was straight up dead.
I did the same thing.
Yeah. I'm actually very curious about how many readers did that, flipping ahead to see if Ned Stark was really okay.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, I like when it comes to like inspirations and stuff like that, like for me it's always kind of been like two different questions. Like what are your childhood inspirations? Like what made you actually love fantasy? And then like kind of what are your immediate inspirations? Like, for the books I am currently writing. And like so like cuz growing up it was for me like Robin Hood and King Arthur and C.S. Lewis and stuff like that. All the stuff that you kind of get introduced to as a kid and that I fell in love with and was like, oh, these are really cool worlds, Sherwood Forest and Camelot and all that. That's some of my biggest stuff. But then once you get closer, things maybe take a little bit of a darker turn with Game of Thrones or for me it was very much Stephen Erickson and Joe Abercrombie for the last 5 years or so. And so it's it'll vary on the day as well. If I'm remembering what it was in particular that made me write a particular thing, what influenced a particular chapter or something like that. So my answer may vary.
See, I think that's really cool because it is. I'm really interested in what makes people write like the little things. Like whenever we say like who are your influences for for writing this book, then we all usually have a list of authors we go to. But like in City Stained Red, one of the big features is the massive economy that's driven by horse-sized spiders. And that came about when I was with my sister at the New York Museum of Natural History, and there was an exhibit on silk spinning, on silkworms. And I thought, that's pretty cool. But worms are so, like, creepy and stupid. Why not, like, giant spiders? And I thought, yeah, spiders. And then how do we work these spiders? What do we do? And that just eventually became City Stained Red. So it's like weird little shit that makes you that will birth books. I think that's very interesting.
So kind of like Soylent Green is people, City Stained Red is spiders. That's what we
City Stained Red it's all spiders all the way down.
No, I agree. I love that kind of thing. Like in Promise of Blood, I can't even remember if I was yet at the point of writing Promise of Blood or if I was just planning it at the time. But I went and saw Sherlock Holmes, the first one with Robert Downey Jr., and I loved the scene, kind of the ambiance of the scene where he's bare knuckle boxing. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to have a chapter where we meet a bare knuckle boxer because I think that's so cool. And that wound up in Promise of Blood, and one of the side characters ended up being a bare knuckle boxer because of that.
Did you find the bare knuckle boxing in Sherlock Holmes to be historically accurate?
I do not care.
The rule of awesome, right?
Historical accuracy in your fantasy?
No, I am not a historical accurate. Like within reason, pretty much. I aim for like 1810 plus or minus 50 years, which probably would give a real historian a stroke hearing that. So I don't know. If I have to do more than Wikipedia research, it sucks all the fun out of writing for me.
Well, I mean, like we're not writing history, and like that's why it's always weird that, like, there's one going around on IO9 right now, like 10 misconceptions about medieval history you'd get from a fantasy novel. I'm like, I'm reading a fantasy novel, not a history novel.
Yeah,
I don't remember there being dragons and wizards in the war in 1776.
No,
it would have been great.
Like it would have been way better.
Like Ben Franklin riding a dragon.
He would have too.
Playing an electric guitar.
They just had an agreement that no one would write about it. It actually happened, but it's fallen out.
I've just broken the seal.
Man, Sam's ruining things.
We have a question from someone on Twitter. This is from Patrick J. Stahl, who asks, "You believe that the trilogy is the ultimate form of three-act storytelling?" Of course, both of you writing interlinked series might have an interesting perspective on that.
I don't
Bryan,
know. What do you
take
think
this
about
one?
that, Sam?
I don't know if I'd say it's the ultimate because I have not seen enough expressions of the three act work, and I actually in all of my books I divide them up into three parts, and I do call them acts. But I think that's just a very straightforward, satisfying way to build a story. Like, you start off with a good story and introduce all the crazy shit, and then at the end stuff gets bad, and then throughout Act 2 stuff gets worse, and then by Act 3 we see who is still standing. And I think that's just a very straightforward, easy way to do it. And I'm not, at this point in my career, I am not looking to reinvent structures. Like, it's hard enough writing right now. Maybe one day, when I'm just stupidly, fabulously wealthy, and I have the time and inclination to reinvent the three-act trilogy by presenting it all through a series of hoots and whistles that you can purchase from audible.com. Maybe then, but for now, the trilogy is very satisfactory.
Yeah, it's like trilogies are kind of like a great bargaining point between a writer who wants to, create something cool and spend plenty of time in a world, versus, maybe like a publisher who would prefer that they build a fan base and then milk it dry for, just because that's kind of what a lot of authors do, and I don't. And what publishers kind of like, because we get fan bases, and then those fan bases will keep buying books in that world, and so you'll have like a 10-book series or more or a little bit less, and some authors do it very well, and other authors don't, and you never know when it was the author's decision or the publisher's, or it's always going to be a combination thereof. But I feel like a trilogy is a great midway point there, where you're spending plenty of time there,
Right.
but you're not just beating a dead horse. And it is true that it is kind of a natural. That three-act thing is very natural in storytelling. I've been talking a lot the last couple of weeks in regards to Autumn Republic being out, that the three books, Promise of Blood, Crimson Campaign, and Autumn Republic, are really just the beginning, middle, and end of one long book. So yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, it was very. When I first got published, it was very trendy to ask, like, well, why do we even do trilogies? And a lot of it is just so that people won't, because there are limits to how much you can put in one book, is basically the answer. And, I guess the argument there is like, well, couldn't you trim a lot of it down? Like, maybe, but I didn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
So, and at the end of the day, you still got to write for yourself. Otherwise, it's just no fun.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That was a perfect segue into my next question.
Awesome.
I have an idea of I know pretty well what Sam thinks of this. Bryan, I haven't seen you talk about it as much. There's a trend right now, I think many people would agree, toward dark fantasy. Grim dark is the term that's thrown around a lot. Bloody battles and people being killed, Ned Stark being killed at the end of the Game of Thrones, for example. But Sam, you've said before that you believe fantasy should be fun. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I do. Gosh darn it, it's a good thing I've been drinking this quality Asahi beer that I can now really let loose and tell you what my thoughts are.
You've ruined everything, Ellen.
I really desperately hope to one day become a spokesperson for Asahi beer. And one day someone's going to be watching one of my hangouts and be like, we got to get this guy.
Bryan, I was thinking earlier we should come up with a drinking game for Sam. Every time someone mentions trilogy, he has to take a drink. For the end,
I do that anyway.
he'll be on the floor.
So anyways, Grimdark. You know, my thoughts on Grimdark are continuously evolving, and for a while I was very anti-Grimdark just because I saw it as trying way too hard. And indeed, that's where the origin of the word Grimdark comes from. It comes from the tagline for Warhammer 40,000, which is, "In the grim darkness of the future, there is only war." And if you've never played Warhammer 40K, it's basically ridiculously grim. There are guys walking around in armor made of skulls. There are demons with 16 breasts that eat the souls of space elves, who all power their armor with their dead brethren. It's ridiculously weird, and you know that's where the idea of Grimdark came from, was simply trying too hard to be edgy and shocking and offensive. And you know, I don't care much for that iteration of Grimdark because I don't like trying too hard because then it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel exuberant. It feels like we are writing for the benefit of offending someone's sensibilities. And that strikes me as a very cheap way to get attention. But you know, City Stained Red in one review was branded as grimdark, and I'm like, yeah, I thought that was weird because it seemed pretty more optimistic than most of the grimdark I've read. But you know, everyone called Joe Abercrombie grimdark back in the day. You know, like, the definition has moved on to where Joe is like kind of on the lighter side of grimdark now. But I mean, Joe's books are they're fun. Like, you could not deny that they are fun. They're full of witty dialogue and banter and all the stuff I really love in fantasy. Like, at a lot of times Joe has his characters like almost come very close to acknowledging that they're in a fantasy book, but edges off just before
he breaks the fourth wall.
Just before, because at that point it's like laughing at the audience, but you know, he keeps the joke going until you're laughing with the audience. And I don't think grimdark is the antithesis of fun, but I do think it can quickly become about posturing, which is not fun.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and I agree with that kind of assessment with like Joe's stuff, because there is a lot of fun in it. You know, he makes you love these horrid people because of their inner monologues and the things they say and do in private, and it's you know, that kind of thing. It makes it kind of edge away from, you know, kind of what we think of as grimdark these days. You know, I've also had my books referred to as grimdark, and if you take some parts of them, you know, the nobility of an entire country being executed at the beginning of book one, then yeah, that's pretty dark. But the context itself, you know, that you build around it, I think has a lot to do with how you label things, and you like, I personally try to keep things, you know, a little bit lighter and funnier between the characters. You know, having, you know, they're real people, you know, taking on real lives, doing real things, and real people use humor all the time. Real people, a lot of times, they don't take themselves, you know, as seriously as you know, the characters you will see in the stuff that I would truly consider grimdark are the type of, are just irredeemable people. That have nothing good about them, and that you know their mothers would not love them, kind of people. And you know, I don't write characters like that, really.
Well, it's like I do feel there are some people who decide they don't like a book because we have this weird thing in wanting to take ourselves seriously as a genre, where no one can just not like something. Like, no one can just say, "Hey, I didn't like this." They have to like come up with a reason, like this eloquent, objective reason why they didn't like it and why it's flawed. So it's like, it's not me that didn't like it; it's actually flawed. And so a lot of people toss out the idea is like, oh, it's grimdark, I don't like it. And I do think there is some of that, and that sort of stifles any discussion we might have over it. Because, to talk about Joe Abercrombie, I want to go on record as saying that Joe Abercrombie's sex scenes are brilliant. And I did not understand this until way, way after I had finished them. But they are all about how hard it is to be human, and they are fantastic if you understand that those sex scenes are just two people trying their damnedest to be human again and failing miserably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I like when I'm thinking about kind of giving a level to like grimdark or something like that, I'll my personal, in my head, I'll be like, okay, would the average Brandon Sanderson fan be offended by this book? And that's like kind of the middle of the scale for me, and because Brandon's very good at doing that middle where he's everybody will like his stuff because it is fun and has a little bit of everything, and without being so fun in certain ways that he's going to offend a lot of people.
Right.
And I think that's kind of brilliant in writing. And I skew slightly towards the Joe Abercrombie side of that,
right.
But I try not to skew too far because I like having an audience that's enjoying themselves and not feeling icky when they read my books. And I don't particularly like writing super crazy dark things.
Yeah, so you would say that you are simultaneously Brandon Sanderson's creepy uncle and also Joe Abercrombie's like frigid, uptight, uber conservative uncle.
Somewhere in between there.
Yeah. But no, I agree with all of that. Like, I do want to push towards fun, but I feel like fun, when you're having fun with the audience, it really leaves them open for when you just sucker punch them with something serious.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah.
I really enjoy doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a jerk.
We've got several more audience questions. Do you want to start with the more serious writing one or the off-the-cuff kind of silly one?
Oh, we just spent time doing serious, so let's roll into silly.
All right, Will Webster on Google asks, Space Marines or Imperial Guard?
Oh, Imperial Guard, definitely. Got a huge mechanized crawl, fucking 3 basilisks, tear shit up. You don't even have to be on the battlefield. Anyone who got that, credit for you.
I'm assuming that's a Warhammer reference.
Yeah, that is Warhammer 40K.
I am so not familiar with Warhammer in any way, shape, or form.
Like a schlemiel is someone who spills soup on people, and the schlemazel is the guy who gets the soup spilled on him. The Space Marines are the schlemiel, and the Imperial Guard is the schlemazel. But yeah, that's we like. I'll be honest. I have only played Dawn of War. Like, I have not actually played a tabletop version because it's way too expensive.
Yeah, those are nuts.
Like, some people have vast. Howard Taylor has a vast miniatures empire.
When I was in Utah for Salt Lake Comic Con, I got to visit Howard's house and see his little collection. Not exactly little, but gorgeously painted.
Get mad if you call it little.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly little, but oh my gosh, gorgeously painted and just beautiful. And oh man, a little bit jealous, which is weird because I've never played it or really done miniatures, so it's strange that I'd get jealous.
Yeah. There's that primal nerd urge to collect things, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And resent anyone with a bigger collection.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have a collection at all, you privately resent someone who has a bigger one.
Yeah, well, and then there's the stuff that you do collect. Like the first person I know that gets one of those, the helicarrier from Avengers in Lego, which they announced a month or two ago. I'm killing them and taking it.
I imagine you petulantly like smashing it.
Just pick it up and
Like
throw it
saying,
on the
we
ground.
built it once. Ah!
Ah!
So that is the answer to your question.
Yes.
All right, let's go to now. We have to do a serious question.
Serious question.
Serious question. Not that serious. Don't worry. This is Ben Wheeler Floyd on Twitter. He asks, how much does the awareness of your audience weigh on you when you're writing late in a series? I guess, Bryan, this is mostly for you since you just finished a series, but Sam, you've also done that.
Yeah. So I'll let Bryan.
Yeah, when it got to book 3, you know, when I was planning it, because things were already set in track. You know, things are on motion, and I'm just, you know, pushing the train towards the final station, kind of thing. But you know, I do kind of lurk around, you know, reading my reviews and stuff like that, which is a horrible idea, and nobody should ever do it, because it makes you feel immense hatred towards yourself and other people. But so I do try to put my finger though on the pulse of what people are enjoying or not enjoying in a very general sense. When it gets to specifics, I do my very best to ignore those because I don't, you know, that gets, you know, that gets down to personal preference from reader to reader. But if I see if there's like an overarching complaint on a book, I'll try to keep that in mind when I'm working on the next one. And that's more of a me trying to be a better craftsman and do things that will entertain people better. You know, just kind of, you know, so it's both a public kind of, you know, authorly thing to do, but also a very private me trying to be better at it, at my job sort of thing.
I think you stumbled upon something brilliant there, in that we need to discern between craft and content. And I think it's a very good idea to heed your audience's concerns when it comes to craft, because that was definitely something I considered when writing The City Stained Red. My readers from previous trilogies said, like, oh, you know, the pacing's very stiff, the world building is very shallow, and I'm like, all right, you know, I want to consider that. These are things that, like, I can objectively improve. But, you know, like, I got a review of City Stained Red where someone said, you know, I really like Gareth, there should be more Gareth. Gareth is just a complete psychopath of a character. If I put him in as much as that reviewer wanted, he would not like Gareth that much anymore because he would be there all the time, and he wouldn't be a breath of fresh air when he just comes in and kills someone. He'd be the standard. So, like, your audience expectations on content is something you have to not be afraid to say no on, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because, you know, Chuck Wendig said, you know, be very careful about giving the audience what they want. Because, you know, they typically know what they want, but they might not know what the story needs. So I'm definitely in agreement with you on there. It's like, what you take into consideration what they're saying, but you can't always agree with them.
Well, if audience members, you know, want more of like a certain character, which is something I get a lot with a few different characters of mine. If I'm not loving writing that character while I'm writing that book, then anything that I do write with that character is going to fall flat, and it won't be the character that you love so much that you're demanding them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that happened in Autumn Republic. There was a couple of characters that they weren't popping for me, and so I focused on other people. And I'm glad I did it, despite a couple of people saying, "Oh, I wish there was more of this person." I'm glad I did it because if I had tried too hard, like we were talking about earlier, it would have, you know, people would have been able to tell.
Yeah, and you know that's one of those very hard to qualify things, isn't it? Because so much of this is instinct,
Mm-hmm.
and instinct that you learn only by doing, and you only learn that by messing up a few times.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But Yeah, like some characters you just can't get too far into, and some characters are special because you don't get too far into them, and the audience will actually fulfill a lot of expectations for a character that isn't around as much as they'd like in their heads, and that's why it's so satisfying to them.
Well, I get asked reasonably frequently about doing like a novella or or a viewpoint of Capol, who is Taniel's little kind of assistant
Yeah.
uh, slash whatever, and no spoilers, but I, I it would completely ruin her character to
Right.
give her viewpoint. It would ruin the fun that she is and the mystery that she is, and just kind of dash all of that. And it would be, people just kind of, would read
Yeah.
that and say, oh well, whatever.
It's kind of like how in comedy there is a straight man and the goofball, and the
Hmm.
straight man is not funny, but he is integral to the atmosphere, because the straight man is actually the one carrying things and pushing everything forward, and the goofball is just being funny. So of course
Hmm.
we like the goofball because he is putting his all into being funny, whereas the straight man is actually pushing stuff forward.
Yeah.
Whereas goofballs probably could not carry the act on their own. At that point, it's just like, well, what is this psychopath doing?
Yep. Yep.
Good question. Good question. Give yourself a gold star.
Well done, Ben. Speaking of goofballs, uh, both of your books, at least the first books in the series, Bryan, yours widens a little bit from this later on, have a little bit of genre blending going on. There's the detective angle in Promise of Blood, which is the first book in Bryan's series, and the City Stained Red. There's a little bit of a heist adventure there. You have some kind of wacky people. Is that something that you think is necessary to sort of keep the genre fresh? Were those just stories that you thought would be really fun? What made you bring in those different elements?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think that kind of you try to vary things up, both for the audience and for yourself, to create something a little bit different and that's not just going to be a generic adventure fantasy, like a quest or something like that. So you want to do something interesting, like a heist or a mystery or any number of different things that you can do that are also going to interest different types of people. I'm actually very proud of the fact that lots of readers don't like all three of my viewpoint characters. Readers seem to always have a favorite and a least favorite, and I think that kind of means I'm doing my job of having a variety of interesting characters, so that they're not all just kind of blended into a mush.
Yeah, no, that is completely dead on. I have 6 viewpoint characters, and some there are readers that straight up don't like, but what I really pay attention to are the ones that they do like. I like to see what I'm doing right, because that's totally it. Is they're not a real character if everything about them is likable, are they? Like, I don't know a single person who I like everything about them. That'd be weird. They wouldn't feel real to me. They would feel like they were made specifically for me to like them, and thus would feel like pandering or weird.
Yeah.
But to answer Ellen's question, the heist scene is actually more it's basically my love letter to Scott Lynch, really, because I absolutely like. I still consider Lies of Locke Lamora to be like the apex of fantasy. It's just a book that does everything right, and like I don't fanboy often, but yeah, I would totally kill someone who said something bad about Lies of Locke Lamora around me. And it was a lot of inspiration from Scott Lynch on that, but at the same time, it was also a fun thing. It was just really, it broke up the tension, and because at that point in the book, they're sort of aware that shit's about to go south. These characters, and so something that's sort of fun and looking at a different objective broke up that tension, but at the same time, it also left the audience off guard for when I sucker punch them later with a massacre. So,
Bryan, you alluded to another way that both of your books are different from sort of the stereotypical sword and sorcery fantasy. When you mentioned the quest, usually you have your characters off riding along a desert or in the wilderness, but both of your stories are centered, at least the first book's pretty much, on cities. Was that a conscious decision to bring them out of the quest mode and into something a little more settled?
I mean, for me, it certainly was. I didn't want to write something that was, a rehash of all the '90s fantasy that I did grow up loving for sure. But I wanted something different, so yeah, definitely, I wanted to get away from all that. And I've actually come to kind of loathe some of those like very deep set genre sort of tropes that some people just can't get away from. The farm boy hero is one of those ones that I want to choke myself every time I see that. And then the quest with really nothing else going on is also one of those that you're just kind of like, oh, come on, branch out a little bit.
yeah, I mean, I'm kind of tempted to fight you right now just because, I do have a quest at the center, but I think you're also dead on in that you can't have the quest be the only thing.
Well, and I'm not saying that. So, like, there's a difference between having, the quest for, like a golden goblet or something ridiculous like that,
Right.
Versus the characters having very definite goals that they're searching for.
That happen to align with the quest.
Yeah, like there's it's hard to say because every book is going to have some kind of a quest in some way, but that's because it's all you have to have something driving the action, and so a quest you can define a quest in different ways. But yeah, it's kind of hard to say really, but
I mean, without dithering too much over the definition of
yeah.
because I absolutely despise let's define X panels. I do agree with you, and it always struck me as weird when I was reading like Dragonlance and so forth. It's like we're on a quest to get treasure Y, and I just sort of asked, okay, why do you want that? And like, I don't know, it's there. Like, yeah, I can't do that. I do despise that. The city, I thought, was just very interesting in that I felt like it would be really fun to take hardened adventurers who were sort of used to living on edge out in the wilderness and then just thrusting them into civilization where they didn't know how anything worked anymore. And so they're actually kind of relieved when a fight comes around because it's something they understand. But they don't get like social contracts and prejudice and whatnot. It's difficult for them to understand, and I thought that would be really fun to explore.
And I think that's funny because it is a bit of a time-honored tradition, like a very Conan the Barbarian sort of thing that people don't really pay attention to anymore, and that nobody seems to be writing. And so, and I thought that made it, a lot of fun.
That is kind of a Conan thing, isn't it? Like any time he had to fight someone, it was like that was when the tension actually decreased.
Yeah.
Right. Conan has to fight. Yeah, it's like, okay, cool. Now we're in Conan's element. But when he like had to go talk and like arrange a room for the night, he's like, oh God, what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
Like that's when the tension increased. That's a good point.
Here's another question about cities. I wish I could take credit for this one, but this actually came from Laura. Laura, for those of you watching who don't know her, she's our social media manager. Her question is, talking in dollars, what kind of collateral damage do you think happened to the cities in your respective books while your characters were there?
Oh, wow. In American dollars?
Now is this stuff that our characters caused, or that just happened during the course of the books?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I think either way.
Yeah, because I've got an earthquake, a revolution, a foreign invasion, and a few other things that happened during the trilogy. So
Not the
so
earthquake, no natural disasters, just human inflicted.
So just
yeah,
man-made disasters.
yeah, just man-made. Okay. Um, the
That is an
yeah,
awesome question.
that's a really good question. But like I would put mine up on like the end of Avengers in New York level, um, or more kind of place.
Yeah, I would say mine is more akin to Baghdad during the U.S. Invasion and all the strife that happened there. In fact, I actually talked to a couple of veteran friends of mine who were there just to see how urban warfare worked, and it's pretty horrifying. So yeah, there is definitely a lot of collateral damage going on. I would say by today's standards, at least like 2 billion.
Yeah, I don't know if I could. I'm not smart enough to put
Yeah,
like
that's
a number
very
to it, but
because
it's
like I don't know what currency you use, but I use like straight up gold pieces, and like that would get into like equations
yeah,
and
I use like a kind of a dollar analog sort of thing
yeah,
that doesn't quite fit what we think of as a dollar.
yeah. So like we would have to get into equations, and then that's math, and math is
Uh,
stupid.
no, no, I got into this business to specifically avoid math.
Yeah, math is terrible. So good question, Laura, but bad on you for
But
introducing math.
but shame on you, you should
Shame on
know
you for making us remember math.
better.
We're going to get complaints from teachers tomorrow. Famous authors say math is bad.
Math is dumb, kids. Don't study. I'm going to write that on Twitter right now.
Here's another question from Google from Steve Drew. Steve, this is going to be a little bit spoilerish, but we'll go with it. What is the most memorable scene that you wrote in your new novels? The one that made you the most proud, made you laugh, or just simply stood out?
What do you think, Sam?
Ah, boy, I really want to say one of the sex scenes because I was very thoughtful about that one and actually considered quite a bit of it, but then that makes me sound very creepy. Um, but you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and say that because I've always been a very big proponent of sex scenes in fantasy, and I think it's a shame there aren't more of them. And I'm very proud of the one I wrote towards the end that I'm not gonna spoil. You're just gonna have to find out.
Oh, I'm going to take
What?
the easy way out and
Okay.
say that for me it was the climax of the book, which I'm not going to spoil
Climax.
for everyone.
Don't spoil that
Different type of climax than Sam's talking about.
Aha!
Ah, um,
Aha! Go.
so it's funny because I get kind of mixed reactions from people that vary from I was crying to that was dumb to I predicted that was going to happen 3 books ago, and so predominantly it's been really good feedback on it. But regardless of any of the people that didn't like it, I really liked it, and I was really proud of it.
That those are all good reactions to sex.
So everyone's going to have to read both of the books if you want to find out what Sam and Brian's favorite scenes
I
are,
want to high
basically.
five each other on how like tactically evasive were on that one.
I
Like
thought
at
that
no
was pretty good.
yeah, like at no point did we say like, oh, you don't have to read it now because here's the best part.
No,
Here's a
no, it's and I snuck in because it's the third book in the series, so they have to buy all 3 books.
Yeah, buy all of them. Buy our books. Hashtag.
Oh God.
here's a fun question. This one comes from Wesley Chu, a name that you'll recognize. Which
Hi,
character would
Wesley.
Brian be if he were in Sam's book, and vice versa?
Oh, thank you,
Hmm,
Wesley.
yeah.
Uh, Brian would be Captain Dranson at the start of the book, the guy who is sort of just trying to do his job and is sort of very annoyed at all these people who are trying to make his job harder. and he does not much care for heroics and whatnot. He just sort of wants to get through the day. But he wants to do a good job, and his job is his passion. But at the same time, he sort of wishes everyone would make it easier for him.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I don't know if I've got a good character for Sam. I
Do you have someone who's very tall?
I've got a couple of larger people. He could be one of the grenadiers from book 2.
Well, now I feel like you're just judging me on looks.
No, but that's why I stopped, is because I was like, because I could work you in physically, but I don't know if I've got a character that's a good fit for your personality.
Well, Capoel is like pretty soft-spoken and angry all the time, right?
Sam, I wouldn't necessarily call you soft-spoken. Just gonna come out and say that.
Here's to that. And cheers to a salty beer.
So I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that one.
I wish I had bought more of this.
Maybe you can write Sam into the next book, Bryan.
I'll work on writing Sam into the next book. I actually am a little worried.
Bryan, can you write an advertisement for Asahi beer into your next book so that we can see about getting me that sponsorship deal?
Wouldn't that get me the sponsorship deal?
You would be the worst. You don't drink. This is
so you want that because you think I'd just ship it to you.
Advertising beer. It's okay, I guess.
People tell me it's really
People
good.
Tell me I don't drink, personally. If you want to talk cake, then sure. But Bryan does not drink, and that's very noble. But it does not help me get sponsorships from Asahi beer.
I know it's rough. I'm trying. I've been trying for years to get a sponsorship from Costco.
That's where
so
the money
far,
is.
It's not going.
God, that'd be great. You would be an excellent Costco spokesman.
I would build a tower out of their triple layer chocolate cake.
Yeah, like I would cast you as like a deranged gremlin living in their massive stores. And like the commercials would be like this family walking down, and I would be like, "Boy, there are so many great deals. What should we get?" And suddenly, you burst out of a stack of toilet paper, and you're like, "Try this." That is my dream for you.
Mine too.
It is a good dream.
Oh,
Here's another question from Twitter before we get completely off into the bizarro world. This is from Wordslinger. He wants to know, how detailed of an outline do you make before you start a new book, a new chapter, or a new scene?
Go ahead.
It depends on the mood for me.
Oh, Jesus. Everything is mood for you.
No, it does. Like I could step out of the shower with like a fully formed scene in my head and just sit down and vomit it onto the computer and in an hour. Or
that's the weirdest way to say that.
Or I could spend days agonizing and plotting every little thing that characters say in a scene. When it comes to the whole book, I try to kind of do the beginning, the mid-book climax, and the end-book climax, and then I'll kind of pace out, sketch out a few of the scenes in between very loosely, and then kind of play with that as I go. But so it varies for me.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I try to write a I start with a what I know document. Like I just write down this character will do this at some point, and this character will do this at some point, and then it just slowly fleshes out as I go through it. But by the time I start writing, it's never fully fleshed out. Oftentimes, it's not even 50% fleshed out. So much changes as I'm writing. I will get to a point, I will have this this plot point completely crafted out, and I'll have had it down on my outline for weeks. and then I will actually get to that scene and write it down. I'm like, oh god, that looks terrible. Like that's just the worst. And then I will delete it and I will stare at the page for a while, and then I will get up and go into the shower and cry for a bit. But then, like, I will dwell, like you, I will dwell and agonize on how to go about it. And, you know, sometimes I hit it, and then sometimes I think, well, you know, I can't think of anything better, and I got to keep moving, so I'll just put that down and come back to it later. So to answer the question, not very detailed at all.
Yeah, yeah. Oftentimes it'll be super detailed, and then everything changes as you're writing. So you know, it changes up a bit.
Shout out to Ben Wheeler Floyd for endorsing me as a spokesman for Asahi Beer on Twitter.
We have one last question from Google. Wes has been waiting very patiently for me to ask you all this question.
Goddamn Wes.
Wesley Chu wants to know, who has wrestled more bears?
How many bears have you wrestled, Bryan, like, in high school?
I mean, the 3 or 4 maybe, but you know, I'm not a big guy. I stick with like black bears.
What about koalas?
Do koalas count as a bear? I know
Like,
it's a koala bear, but like
not technically, but I'm not in the mood to get into this fucking bullshit about what is and what isn't a bear. Is a panda a bear, or is it just a large, stupid raccoon?
or are raccoons really smart little bears?
Oh, have you? There's a video of a raccoon who is given cotton candy, and you know raccoons wash everything before they eat it. So he tries to wash his cotton candy, and it disappears, it disintegrates, and he looks so sad.
Yeah.
But you know he's a lesser bear, so he deserves it.
Yeah, you can't trust raccoons, not at all.
That makes me think there's like a story behind that where you got swindled out of some inheritance by a raccoon.
How do you know I didn't?
I mean, they wear suspicious looking masks, so
Yeah,
I would not trust one.
Yeah, tiny little bears.
I would say I have probably wrestled more bears.
Oh, I'd agree.
Like I am bigger and I am in a position to wrestle more bears. But I have seen Bryan catch a pigeon out of mid-flight and just eat it. It was incredible.
I was hungry.
Yeah, we were at Gen Con, and we were just walking down the street. And, you know, so often at conventions, you're like, oh, where do you want to go? It's like, oh, do you want to go to this restaurant? No, not so much. You know, our friend David Woolreich was with us, and we couldn't decide where to go. And Bryan was just getting hungrier and hungrier. When, you know, downtown Indianapolis, a pigeon just flew overhead, and, you know, God bless him, Bryan leapt 4 feet in the air, caught him out of midair, and just devoured him in 2 bites. It was incredible. And then like an owl, he like swallowed the whole thing, and then vomited out the bones and feathers. It was astonishing. This actually happened.
Oh, it's every word of it is true. It's true.
So yeah.
I'm not proud.
We will both be at Gen Con this year, so you will almost certainly see it again.
Oh yeah, there's gonna be a lot of authors at Gen Con this year. Everybody should come.
We're gonna colonize that shit.
Yeah.
Like a disease.
I wouldn't go that far.
I have a question for you, Bryan.
Oh, okay. Hey, yes, Sam.
If you were a disease, what disease would you be?
Oh.
What disease would you be, Bryan?
I don't know. I got nothing for you right there.
Just the first thing that pops into your head.
I'd rather not lose all hope of my mother being able to watch this.
Ellen is like desperately rethinking her career choice right now.
Yeah, she's wondering what kind of mistake she just made.
Either that, or she is wondering what kind of disease she would be.
She.
I'm used to this. I've been at several conventions with you, Sam. This is par for the course.
That is true. I think I have actually asked you this question once.
Ellen's checking the counter to make sure that everybody has left the hangout by now.
Well, Ellen is watching the clock like, oh my god, 2 more minutes, and then we can end it.
Believe it or not, there are still people watching. They really want to know what disease you are, Brian.
What disease are you, Brian? Quit.
I don't know diseases.
First, gun to your head. Gun to your head.
Gun to my head.
I'm a supervillain. I have kidnapped your wife, and if you don't tell me what disease you're going to be, I'm going to use my death ray.
I'm the common cold because I just kind of lurk quietly in the background most of the time.
That is true.
And then when you least expect it, I'm there.
I think I'm like a big bombastic disease, like explosive diarrhea.
Yeah,
but that's a symptom.
Are you dysentery?
I could be dysentery. Like I killed a lot of people on the Oregon Trail.
That's true.
Like,
you killed Linda.
I messed
my wife.
Oh wow. I'm sorry about that.
Man, I had a flashback to 4th grade, and it's
wow.
I'm gonna have to go lay down for a little bit.
Did you make up like backstories for all your characters on the Oregon Trail?
Usually it would be like friends and like girls I had crushes on and like.
Oh my god!
What? No, come on, everybody.
That is my new pickup line for bars. It's gonna be like, hey, I once had a dream that you and I were on the Oregon Trail together.
But not the real Oregon Trail.
No, not the real Oregon Trail. I once put you in as a name of a character I took on the Oregon Trail, and you died of dysentery. So can I buy you a drink, or what?
The new tagline will be, you have just died of Sam Sykes.
You have died of Sam Sykes.
Oh, gosh.
Let's make that a hashtag. You have died of Sam Sykes.
I feel like that's a good place to end this hangout.
Yeah, any last
night.
Comments from either of you? Do we get to see your costumes, or is that just for me behind the scenes?
I can put on my hat here.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law bought me this hat, and it's very, very comfortable.
That's not the hat.
Oh, which hat? Oh, you want this?
Yeah, I want the fancy hat. Show me like full parade dress, Bryan.
My wife made this. It's my shako for that a soldier in the Powder Mage Trilogy would wear.
I kind of thought you were going to wear it the whole time.
I have an enormous head, so it doesn't actually fit on me properly.
Pro tip. This is a Sam Sykes pro tip.
Yes.
If you tweet me the phrase "I've got a real red wagon," I will tweet you a picture of Bryan on Napoleon's horse.
This is where we see how many people have been paying attention.
That's how I'm going to judge how successful this was.
Yeah.
How many tweets you got that?
I don't know. Probably
Thank
not
you, everyone, for watching. We'll probably be doing another one of these in a couple of months, but hopefully dysentery and explosive diarrhea will not get discussed in that one. Thank you, Sam.
Don't count on it.
Oh, Mr.
Unless we invite Sam again. We'll
Bye. See. Thanks for coming.
So here's the pretty book. This is The City Stained Red by Sam Sykes. Here we have The Autumn Republic by Bryan McClellan. They're both out now. Go out and buy them. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Yay!
Yay!